Hey, what's up? I'm Greg with G&M Design Co. and I just made the most bougie mallet I've ever made. Paduke, walnut, and gold epoxy inlay. So I made it in this tiny shop of mine and I'm going to show you how I made it. Let's do it. So let's raid the scrap bin. So I found this beautiful piece of walnut. It's got a giant knot hole in it, but we're going to cut around that for the handles. Also, while digging around, I found this beautiful piece of, not that one, a beautiful piece of Purdue, which I think is going to be great with that gold epoxy inlay. So we'll go ahead and take these, plane them down, and throw them on the CNC. I'm going to be using the CNC for this project because with it being my first YouTube video, I don't want to drag it on. So get it strapped down, do a little bit of computer magic here, and get it downloaded to a thumb drive and throw it in my Winfinity and let it do the work from here. So here I'm just getting it dialed in, getting it ready, and getting it going. A few action shots here. If you're interested at all in a CNC, I'm really happy with this one. I got this one about 3 months ago, the Winfinity Foreman, and in my tiny shop, mounting it on the wall is such a game changer. It allows me so much more floor space, and it's powerful enough, even wall mounted, to where it cuts through that Badoo. So I actually made a little bit of a mistake. I should have left these attached to the main board and went ahead and engraved them before I cut them off of here. So now I've got to cut them one by one. All right, we'll get it done. Ugh, it sucks. So we're going to go ahead and clean this up from where I cut it out of the board it was attached to. It leaves sometimes these little pins or tabs, or what they're called, to attach it to the board. Get those off, and let's just do a little dry run, see what it looks like. We're going to put it all together, make sure all the pieces cut right. I've never had an issue with it, but before you build anything, you should always do dry fits, dry runs, just to make sure everything matches up, especially before you start gluing or removing any more material than you need to. And here I'm throwing it back on the CNC from where I forgot to engrave the design on it that we're going to be epoxying. So always remember that. Do all your engraving while it's still attached to the main board. It makes it a lot easier. And here, Ultra Clear Epoxies, they reached out to me and wanted me to try their epoxy. And doing my first epoxy inlay, I was like, well, we'll try any epoxy I can get. I don't know the difference between all of them. So this was a super easy mix. It's just a 1-to-1 ratio. You just mix it a little bit at a time. I think I did like 8 ounces and 8 ounces using a scale and stirred it up really well. So that's going to be the key thing. Everybody always tells me is stir, stir, stir. Make sure you over stir it, because in stir around the outside of the top of the cup, anywhere the epoxy's at, because you want that stuff to mix as well as possible. Here I'm just adding in a little gold pigment, a little gold mixture to add to that epoxy, and let's get the pouring. So here I'm just pouring a little bit at a time. I'm, like I said, a newbie at epoxy. I have messed with it, but never actually done a pour with it. So that's one thing I'm told is pour slow, make sure all the air bubbles get out, and just take your time. Don't over pour more than you need to, because that's going to take a lot of sanding to get that out, especially these small pieces that I can't run through the planer. So these have had 24 hours to dry, and I really like how this turned out. Shout out to Ultra Clear Epoxy. They did reach out to me and wondered if I was interested in trying their stuff. And so far, so good. I really like how this has turned out, but let's sand it and see what we get. So here we're just going to get it sanded down real good, get all that epoxy off, and switch over to the router. I'm going to put a little round over bit on my handles and kind of round it over, sand it down real good before we go ahead and get any further on this. Try and go ahead and get everything set up to where it is ready for glue up. So here I'm just doing one last second dry fit just to make sure everything's going to fit well before I start the glue up. And we'll go ahead and get it glued up. So here I made a mistake. I tried something a little different than I have with mallets before, and I tried to go ahead and glue the handle in while I was attaching the head of the mallet, and I don't recommend this. There's a reason everybody else does it this exact same way. Normally you glue up the head, then attach the handle after it's all dry. and you just run it through the head, then drive your divider in the top and cut it off. But I was trying to get ahead of it and make sure that handle is as secure as possible. I will be using this mallet on chisels and not just for looks, so, but I don't recommend doing that. And also, if you get it right, you don't need very many clamps. You can see here I'm using some very small little clamps because you don't need very much pressure. And here you can kind of see my problem with putting the handle in so early is that it sticks out the top. So I'm having to glue it up, make sure everything's secure, and then readjust the top here and left and right and try and get it all wiggled in there. So that's not recommended if you make a mallet like this. So while that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and run my wedge for the top of the mallet. It drives in the top of the handle. They're squeezed in there real tight. I'm just using a rockler taper jig here to kind of get me a wedge at a real good angle, but also thick enough to fit in there pretty tight. And we'll go ahead and drive it in. And just a little extra glue on the top to kind of hold everything in. It never hurts to have a little more glue, especially where the handle connects to the head, because if you're going to be using this, it's going to take a beating. So once it's dry, we'll go ahead and flush cut it. And I'm going to grab my router here, and I am going to throw in another roundover bit. And we're going to put a nice little roundover on this thing, on all parts of it, especially on the head. That way there's no sharp edges that could crack or fray or chip out. I'm just going to use a square here to line it up, make sure it's good and flush. And here we're just putting the roundover on it. I love putting a small roundover on almost everything I make if I'm not putting a chamfer on it. It just gives it that nice, clean, fold over look, and it gives it a finished look. It doesn't look like it's just as blocky or as unfinished. And if you sand it right, that little roundover always adds a nice little shine to the corners of your piece. Just going to take a wet shop towel here and kind of wipe it down, kind of pop the grain and get any loose sawdust that may be in that grain out. And this is kind of going to give it that nice glass finish that we love so much, especially when I put the finish on it. And just make sure to get the handle too as well. And then after that, I'm going to hand sand it with 320. It's a higher grit, but I don't really want to sand down through the material. I just want to get any loose fibers that are standing up off. And then we're going to finish it with some Bumbleshoot's wood finish. This is the finish I use on almost everything I make, is this and their Banuba wax. It's super easy to use and doesn't require any special tools in a small shop, and also very safe to use. Very natural. So if you don't have the greatest ventilation in your small shop, I recommend going with a good hand finish that's all natural. Something you don't have to breathe in any toxic fumes, especially in a confined area. And I'm really liking how this turned out. The reason I went with this wood finish is it's really going to pop out those colors. It's not going to darken, but it is going to create a richness in the color.
And there we go. There it is. Pretty happy with my first time actually trying an epoxy pour, especially in something like Paduke wood. So happy with that. Hey, so pretty happy with how this turned out. Appreciate you following along for my first YouTube video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, and I'll do more of these. My main goal is to show everybody just what you can do in a small shop like mine. I've made some amazing things in here, and I'd like to share what I keep making with everybody, show you what can be done in one of these shops, hopefully inspire somebody. If you want to see more of that, like and subscribe. Any comments, any constructive criticism, put them in the comments, and I will see you next time.